College football playoff top 25 is being released as we speak. Florida comes in at 11, Auburn's at 12, Baylor's at 13, which is actually down a slot. Wisconsin 14, Michigan at 15. We have not seen the top 10 just yet. When it comes our way, we'll bring it to you. But joining me now to talk some Ute football, we'll get some hoops chattering with him as well. Kurt Kragthorpe from the Salt Lake Tribune back on the drive on a Tuesday. Kurt, thanks for taking the time, even though we're right in the middle of the college football playoff rankings being released.
I'm counting on you to fill me in, so it'll be good.
I will let you know, and just so you know, coming in at 10 is Oklahoma. So, Kurt, before we see where the Utes are ranked, what's your prediction here?
I'm thinking 8th, one way or another, but I've seen some 9s out there, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was looking at some projections earlier today. Penn State is in at 9. I was looking at some projections, Kurt, earlier today that a lot of people think the Utes may fall, but now that Penn State is in at 9, maybe we'll see them kind of remain. So we'll let you know as soon as we see the Utes come up on the screen. But as of now, Penn State is at 9. So surprised or Minnesota comes in at 8. So it looks like the Utes are going to move up, Kurt.
Wow, that's a great sign. That means Oregon will be 6th at least. So that's great for the Pac-12. I mean, the way my mind works, I keep thinking in terms of fallbacks. I know that's not the optimistic way of thinking, but I do love the idea that the Utes could somehow lose the conference championship game and still go to the Rose Bowl if Oregon goes to the playoff.
And there it is. So Utah is at 7. Some breaking news. Utah moves up one spot coming off a bye. They'll be in at 7, Minnesota at 8. A lot of people thought Minnesota would jump up ahead of Utah, but they did jump up 9 spots. So, Kurt, as we await the rest of the rankings, what do you think is the most realistic scenario for Utah come bowl time?
Yeah, I think that being realistic, I think and hopeful at the same time, and I think we're probably getting ahead of things by assuming the Utes are going to win these last 3 games, but they definitely should. So I like to think the floor is a New Year's 6 game of some kind that even if they didn't end up in the Rose Bowl, they would go to the Cotton Bowl. And certainly if it use a famous phrase, if the playoffs started today, that's where the Utes would be. I think would be in the Cotton Bowl.
Yes, indeed. And for Ute fans that maybe don't necessarily know what a statement it would mean for them just to play in a Rose Bowl, Kurt, college football probably better than most anybody who covers it around here. What would it mean for the program simply to play in a Rose Bowl? Yeah,
it's just such a mythical thing, and I think it. I kind of in my mind just thinking of the whole landscape, kind of classify all the New Year's 6 games alike. But that's not a Western mentality, and certainly anyone who grew up in Utah or west of here thinks of the Rose Bowl as just this magical event, and it is. And if you're a member of the Pac-12, that's what you aspire to, regardless of how you get there. Now, in the old days, there weren't these mechanisms to get you there various ways other than winning the conference championship. But regardless of how it would possibly happen for Utah this year, that's the ultimate. To think they could do that in year 9 of Pac-12 membership is pretty staggering.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt about that. Hey, we were talking about this earlier in the program. Every time I watch a big-time college football matchup, it's through the lens. LSU comes in at 1, no surprise there, of can Utah match up with these teams? And I was watching LSU and Bama over the weekend, Kurt. It was a hell of a college football game. And I don't know if Utah, beats them or wins the game, but it feels like they can throw punches. Do you think Utah is up there with the college football elite, not just top 10, but maybe top 2 or 3?
Yeah, I think defensively there's no question. And as good as the LSU offense is, I'd like to see how that matchup would play off. That's kind of my Rose Bowl aside. Truly, my dream is to see LSU versus Utah in the playoff in Atlanta. I know not as many people would be able to go from here to that game, but just from a pure football-loving standpoint, I'd love to see that matchup. The one area that still concerns me about Utah's football team is the offensive line. I think they've kind of played around that group in a lot of ways. I think Andy Ludwig has done a tremendous job of creating a running game, and with the help of the best tackle breaker in college football, Zach Moss. of getting production out of the running game without having what I would consider a dominant offensive line. But as you look around the country, there aren't not a lot of offensive lines that just line up and mow people down. Ohio State might be the closest thing, but yeah, that'd be the one area that would still concern me about matching up against some of those elite teams.
So the top four looks like this. LSU is 1, Ohio State is 2, Clemson is 3, and Georgia is at 4. Alabama's at 5, which means Oregon is at 6. So, Kurt, I know you probably need some time to let this marinate a little bit, but your reaction now that you know who the top 6 are: LSU, Ohio State, Clemson, Georgia, Bama, and Oregon.
Yeah, I just think it's from a Pac-12 standpoint, as long as you're in that conversation. I mean, it's just a snapshot right now, and a lot can happen. The Georgia one will be interesting going forward to say what would happen to them if they lost, say, in the SEC championship game to LSU, and I do know this, vice versa would be worse for the Pac-12 if LSU lost in the SEC championship. So go Tigers from that standpoint for sure. But there's a lot of spinning plates in the air, but that's what's so fun about it. I think universally everyone would love a bigger playoff, but there's also something to be said for the intrigue of thinking who's going to be the disappointed team at number 5.
So breaking news on the show: LSU 1, Ohio State 2, Clemson 3, Georgia 4, Bama 5, Oregon 6, Utah at 7. The Utes move up a spot. A lot of people thought they might fall, but Utah moves up to number 7. Kurt, of all the things that we hear about the committee, the things that they weigh, strength of schedule, common opponents, best wins, 4 best teams or 4 most deserving, what do you think is real? Like, what do you think in those rooms they actually care about when coming up with their rankings?
I'd like to think, and I actually do think, perhaps a bit naively, that they are really looking at these football teams and having the conversation we're having right now. How would Team A match up against Team B? And that's what you have to do in college football. It's not like the NFL where you get all these cross-divisional games and you get a sense of who really measures up against whom. And so you really have to just use your eyes and your knowledge and your background and watch these teams play and say, okay, I think these guys are better than those guys. And I think there's enough seasoned people in that committee room that what actually happens, more than the cynics might like to believe.
You're an old school college football guy, Kurt. Do you like the changes to the system? And second part of the question is, would you like to even see it expanded? A lot of people don't. Even the people, it seems like some people that even like the current system would like to see it expanded even more. Where are you at with that?
Yeah, I'm kind of my MO always is to explain the status quo rather than worry about changing it. But the only thing that bothers me about the potential of expanding the playoffs is what if the Rose Bowl becomes meaningless? If you're down to 8 teams, for example, and the Rose Bowl is a quarterfinal game, and then you're not getting a chance to have anything resembling a traditional Rose Bowl. And so I think that changes the conversation for a Pac-12 member like Utah. So that would be my only fear. I'm not sure how you work that out exactly. Maybe you do play the quarterfinals at home sites and kind of preserve the bowl system as we know it to some extent. But so there's a lot of variables there, but yeah, I think I would have a tough time arguing against expanding the playoffs and including all the conference champions, that's for sure.
Not to take too hard of a left-hand turn, Kurt, but I realized I've never heard you give your take on this. And again, as a guy that knows the game and has been around the game so long, what do you make of the movement that will allow players, college football players, to benefit off their name and likeness?
Yeah, I think it's a healthy thing. I think that a lot of people kind of had the misguided notion when they first heard about it is that of the schools paying the money themselves. Now, there's a lot of guidelines and literally some limits that have to come into play here. But the first thing that comes to mind is people think, okay, all of a sudden USC is going to get the 25 football players they want every year. So you're telling me they don't already get the 25 football players they want every year?
Right.
So I don't think the world's going to stop spinning as a result of this. I think there can be some complications. But I think I like the fact the NCAA realizes now maybe they're being forced to be proactive, which kind of goes against the definition of proactive. But I think they are getting out in front of it to the extent that they can have a modicum of control over it and still have it reward the players as they deserve to be.
I haven't been able to catch up with you since Utah's win over Washington, Kurt, and that was a game that I think made a lot of people nervous and coming off a month-long domination for the Utes against inferior competition. It's a tough place to play, even though Chris doesn't have the type of team that he's had over the past few years. And then they go down 14-3, and people inevitably making the same jokes on social media. Here we go again, November curse. They come back and win, and I think it was a really impressive win. From your vantage point, what did that win say about this Utah team, a game that maybe in years past they lose?
Yeah, I thought it said a lot. I mean, I just remember vividly just as the fourth quarter unfolded there, and the Utes had the ball down 21-19. And I had literally tweeted that this is a defining moment, and we'll see how they respond. And they to think that they would drive down the field 82 yards and then again 84 yards to in essence clinch the game. I was just so impressive. They had to complete third down passes. Guys had to make really good catches. And the defense, even though it arguably had its worst game of the season, hung in there, and they got 3 and outs after the 2 times the Utes fumbled the ball in the third quarter and got another 3 and out in between those 2 touchdowns. So I thought it was a huge statement all the way around.
When it comes to the game on Saturday, UCLA is in town, and Utah is a healthy favorite, as everybody expected. If there are concerns, Kurt, at all, as you referenced, 3 games left, Kyle doesn't love looking ahead, but that's what we do in our business. I'd be shocked if they lost any, but it is the Pac-12, and UCLA has some decent wins. They're on a 3-game winning streak, but what are the concerns for the Utes, if any?
Yeah, it's kind of funny as you ask that, because I'm thinking back of the pregame stories I've written this year, and I kind of laugh at myself about the way I've built up some of these opponents, like being convinced that Oregon State was going to move the ball against Utah, and that California would be hard for Utah to score against, and those both turned into blowouts. So it's kind of a bit of crying wolf, I guess you'd say. But I do know that UCLA has athletes, and the quarterback is playing really well. Utah didn't face him last year down at the Rose Bowl, so he's got a new dimension. And the running back, Joshua Kelly, is very good. So I think let's just say this, it's a legitimate test for Utah's defense. If their run defense is as good as we all think it is, they'll prove that against Joshua Kelly and the Bruins.
Let's get some hoops thoughts from you, Kurt, before we set you loose. Running Utes off to a 2-0 start. They win at Nevada, a building that a lot of people find it difficult to play in. Nevada doesn't lose in that building very often. I know it's a new team and a new coaching staff. And then they smash Mississippi Valley State by 94, which is just insanity. I mean, it's just strange. They're picked to finish 9th in the Pac-12, but Larry does a pretty good job of sneaking up on people when nobody expects them to do much. So before we set you loose, Kurt, what do you think are reasonable expectations for the Running Utes?
Yeah, I think, again, with all kinds of asterisks on that Mississippi Valley State game, I think this team is going to exceed my expectations. But I also know that the rest of the league is playing really well. So I think it's going to be really hard to get into the top 8, let's say. I really think that 9 is a pretty good forecast for them. But I am very bullish on the future of the program. They're going to sign tomorrow the number 5 recruiting class in the country. And I like how much last year's freshmen have improved through their sophomore years. I like the looks of some of the freshmen they have in the program right now. So I think if we could turn the clock ahead 2 years from now, I think this will be a very good program. But there's going to be some growing pains this year for sure.
Last thing before we set you loose, and the easy response to this question, Kurt, and it might be the only response, and I could be overthinking it, is the basketball program just hasn't been as good as it was when I was in school there. But I can remember when a ticket to the Huntsman Center was a pretty valuable commodity. And I have a personal quest this year to try and get my listeners to the Huntsman Center because I remember what that building was like when it was rocking. Why do you think, and like I said, the answer could be very simple. They just haven't been near as good. But why do you think the interest in the basketball program has lessened so much as opposed to what it was like back in the day when I was in school there?
Yeah, and I go back even further to 50 years ago, moving to Utah and having BYU draw more fans in the Marriott Center than they did at what was then Cougar Stadium on average, which is mind-boggling to think about. But to move it up to the modern era that you're speaking of, I just think that people are far more conditional about basketball than they are football. I think you start with the premise that there's 6 or 7 football games and they're all events, and you mark your calendars for them, and you're going to go whether it's raining like crazy or cold or 8 o'clock at night in November. But people just don't have that mentality about basketball. And like I say, it takes something to make them respond to it. So I just think that's the nature of college basketball in the West in particular, and even so in Utah, which a lot of us growing up here never thought would happen, but it's certainly the case.
Kurt, thanks so much for the time today. We'll let you go so you can analyze the college football rankings. I know you got work to do, but we appreciate it. And be well, man. We'll chat soon, okay?
Okay, always good to talk to you, Spence. Thank you.
You got it.